I'm Steve Purvis, Project Manager for Accurascale, and we're here today at the Buckinghamshire Rail Centre at Quainton Road to launch our all-new Accurascale locomotive project. Here at Quainton Road, there's all manner of interesting and unique articles of railway history. What we're doing isn't this one though, so let's go and have a look over here. So I'm pleased to announce that it's going to be another addition to our Accurascale steam engine range and also be equally at home in our Power in Britain range, which means unfortunately it's not this wonderful British built South African 25NC that I'm sat on right now, so keep guessing. What we're here today for was used in other countries as well as the UK. It was steam powered, but it also wasn't this Sentinel steam rail car used by the Egyptian State Railways. So we better keep looking. So just in case you hadn't worked it out by now, I'm pleased to announce that we're going to be producing the ultimate 4mm scale Hunslet Austerity. So we've chosen to do an Austerity. Why? Because we can, but it fits part of our range, the Power in Britain range, that these things were the cornerstone of the British industry. Yes, there were other industrial classes, but none were as numerous as the Austerities, or 18-inch Hunslets as they were known as well. There was 485 of these built, initially for the Ministry of Supply in 1943. They carried on building them after the end of the war, and this particular locomotive here was the last industrial locomotive, standard gauge locomotive built in Great Britain for use on home turf. In 1964, this was the very end of British steam production in this country. So it figures that we ought to have a model of this class in our range, and we've tooled different variations that have never been seen before. You know, we've got different cabs, we've got different chimneys and blast pipe arrangements. There's even down to the variations in the gussets on the buffer beam. We have gone all out on this project. There's over 60 in preservation. We've had the opportunity to visit many of these locomotives at different sites around the country to build up a comprehensive picture so we can deliver the best possible model. So what is a Hunslet Austerity? Well, turn the clock back to the early part of the Second World War, in the early 1940s, and the Ministry of Supply were looking for a shunting locomotive to complement the 280s and the 210s and the S160s, but they wanted a small, compact locomotive for shunting the railheads and yards over in the theatre of war over in Europe. Initially, they were looking at the Ginty, the LMS Ginty, which was, again, a compact, easy to service locomotive, but slightly more complicated than what they were after. Thoughts turned to the independent builders, and the Hunslet at the time had a product called the 50550 class, which was a bit like an Austerity, but it had a few changes in the cab. It was a little bit heavier. Hunslet went away and sharpened their pencil, basically. They came up with what was to become the Austerity, the 18 by 26 shunting locomotive. They were designed to be cheap to make, easy to manufacture, throw away at the end of the war. You know, if they had a 2 to 4 year service life, then that was enough. The fact that some of these soldiered on into the 1980s is testament to the great design. They didn't even have tired wheel sets because they weren't designed to last. As it happened, production went to over 400 locomotives, and they were producing these well into the 1960s. This one particularly was 1964 built, and it was the last locomotive built for the British industry, the last standard gauge locomotive built, later than Evening Star. It was the very last locomotive built for our own railways here. So following the end of the war, a lot of these locomotives were surplus. Some were kept for places like Longmoor and Marchwood and all these military depots for use internally, but many were sold on then to the coal board and other industrial users. The coal board were particularly a large customer of these, and they could be found right up until the 1980s working at National Coal Board sites. As time moved on through the 1950s into the 1960s, people were starting to look at things like the Clean Air Act and looking at what things were burning and the emissions and how to make these things easier to operate. So this one has got some later modifications which we'll look at more in detail, but things like the Giesel chimney and the porter modifications of this one were all to improve the reliability, the efficiency, and essentially what wasn't being burnt in the fire was being chucked out the chimney. When the coal board had finished with them, it came at a time where the British preservation scene was just starting off, and a lot of lines were still in embryonic stage, and you had the requirement for reliable locomotives that were relatively cheap to buy second hand and in working order. So whilst the volunteers and enthusiasts were restoring the Castles and the Halls and the B1s and Black 5s, these locomotives, straight out of industry, were carrying passengers and tourists up and down the country, many lines having their own liveries like the Worth Valley or the Lakeside and Heatherthwaite. As the BR locomotives were restored, the Austerity fell out of favour again. And many of them, with over 60 of these in preservation, many of them were dumped at the end of sidings unrestored. Some carried on, but there was a low where there wasn't many in operational condition. But moving forward today, where you've got a requirement for, again, a powerful pocket-sized locomotive that isn't going to cost a lot to run, and railways around the country are suffering from possible financial issues where they need to be more efficient, there are many Austerities that are coming back to life and being used for everyday use. So the chapter isn't quite closed on the Austerity. I think there's a new chapter about to start where these things are going to become more popular. So what makes an Austerity? Well, let's start buffer to buffer. And let's work our way around the locomotive and have a look at all the different features that you can expect to find on the Accurascale model, as well as the real thing. So as built, the Austerities were a shunting engine. They had no real requirements for hauling trains or stopping trains even. So they weren't built with any type of train brake. This one here has been later fitted with vacuum brakes, and the ejector, which you can probably find on this side, runs down into the smoke box and up. But you'll find there's a vacuum brake standard on front and rear of the engine. So we've got that option. We can include that where it's relevant. Okay. I'm just walking around without falling down a pit. So, buffers. Standard Hunslet buffer. Some of the locomotives, when they were not required by the War Department, were bought by the London North Eastern Railway and classified as J94s. These later passed to BR and then again into industry once BR had finished with them or scrapped. But the LNER ones had a different type of buffer, and some of them that worked the Cromford and High Peak Railway had another buffer again with an oval face. So the buffers weren't the only variation in this area. You also have what's known as a double gusseted buffer beam. And that refers to these two parts on the back of the buffer beam, the supports. So not only have you got this one here as a double, you can have a single, which was the original early type. And that can also be seen on the front of the buffer beam in the rows of rivets on the buffers. Moving back again, you come standard features such as the sandboxes and the steps. Steps do change as well, so we've got different types of step with either the turned up corners or the flats. Some of the later versions also had a ladder on the side to access the water filler cap on top of the tank. So as you can see, the wheels are quite unique on these locomotives. They're spokes like many others, but the spokes are square in section with smaller webs in different areas of the wheel. And this is quite a unique looking piece of kit when you look at it close in the drawings. So we've replicated this in die cast. So you've got the correct profile wheels with square spoke. On the LNER locomotives, the J94s, you'd also got a central step, an extra step here, and there was an extra handrail and step up there on the tank side as well. So on our model, the tank will be die cast. So this brings the whole weight of the locomotive up. So it really will be a powerful machine like the real thing. Moving further back, this one here has got a plain firebox side. So on the Porter, Livio Dante Porter, who did the modifications or designed the modifications for these locomotives to be gas producers, there was a number of air holes in the side of the firebox, which allowed air to come in over the top of the fire. So it was combusting the smokebox gases fully. Really deep levels of science when it comes to smokebox and burning and fuels, but that's all in there. So we've got that as an option on our model, coupled with the chimney and the smokebox door that changes too. So as you can see, they're all fitted with a pair of Gresham and Craven injectors. So on our model, these are fully represented in 3D with the pipework for the inlets and the outlets, the steam, the overflow. Rear steps are the same as the front ones, so with or without the side gussets and the sandboxes behind. And then the cab floor. So this one's got a wooden cab floor. Not all of them had that. Some of them had a flat plate instead. So shall we go and have a look in the cab? So we're up in the cab of what is pretty much a standard Austerity. So the layout's very much the same as what you'd expect with your regulator, your twin sight glasses, backhead clacks, steam brake. This one's got an additional equipment, so like on our model, when we've got a vacuum fitted version, we've got a vacuum brake ejector on one side, and on the other side we've got the steam heating control pipework. But what you're seeing here virtually is what you're going to get on the model. So you've got a fully detailed cab interior with full decoration, opening cab roof vent, and a glowing fire hole door. So attached on the rear bunker as pretty standard procedure, you'll see the Hunslet of Leeds works plate. So Hunslet Engine Company of Leeds. This one says 18 by 26, number 3890 of 1964. Again, lying back to it being the last built Hunslet Austerity. But also these vary over time. So there's different styles of leads. There's different wording down the bottom. So some of them have got the 18 by 26, which is the cylinder size, omitted. And some of them that were rebuilt with the Porter modifications have got a rebuild plate on there. Not only that, some of the models, all of our models will include a correct works plate for the locomotive in the right style, but also some of them that were registered to run on the British Transport Commission, or registered by the British Transport Commission to run on the main lines, they had an additional plate with its registration number. So we'll include those as well as an extra part. On the rear buffer beam, very much the same as the front. You've got the single and the double gusseted version. So the single's the early one and the double one being the later one, with the corresponding pairs of rivets on the rear buffer beam. Coming around the back, we've got separately fitted lamp irons on the model. And again, these move depending on what equipment is fitted to the back. So we'll look at those more in detail. A rear vacuum pipe and a rear steam heat pipe on this one because it's a preserved Austerity, which has been fitted for passenger hauling. So let's take a closer look at some Accurascale Austerities. Across the range, we've got a die-cast tank, we've got a die-cast running plate, we've got die-cast chassis and die-cast wheels. This really builds this locomotive up to be a powerful wagon mover, as it were. We've got a twin speaker in there, as you come to expect with an Accurascale steam locomotive, as well as stay alive and an easy access DCC decoder. So let's take a closer look at the options we've got on the Accurascale Austerity. Starting with the model on the left. What you've got here is a pretty much standard early Austerity. So this is how they would have left the Hunslet works on Jack Lane in Leeds. This one has got a single gusset buffer beam. It's got the standard chimney and buffers. It's got the lifting eyes on top of the tank. It's got the original style of cab and no extra braking equipment. It's got the turned up corners to the steps, and as you can see, the full detail underneath the running plate, showing the full inside motion. And we've got, as with all of the models, a removable smoke box door which allows you to access the decoder. Moving slightly forward in time, what we've got here is an XLNER J94. So this one represents it in BR condition. This has got the later oval buffers as fitted for the Cromford and High Peak Railway. It's got the midway steps, shall we say, the additional handrail and footstep on the sides of the tank, and the longer or taller extended LNER pattern bunker. This also has the steps on the rear buffer beam as well. It's a single gusseted version, and this one as well has still got the lifting eyes on top of the tank. Moving forward again, and we're looking at this one here, which represents a period in time when they were working at Longmoor. So this one's got the Longmoor style of vacuum brake fitting down the side. So you've got the ejector pipe on the side, you've got the vacuum brake on the front and the rear buffer beams, and also you've got no steam heat. So this is a non-preservation model. So this dates it particularly to the Longmoor period. Moving forward again, we're going into NCB ownership now, and in particular the Lambton network, or the northeastern area, NCB Northeast, where due to a restrictive loading gauge they modified the cabs. So instead of a standard shaped cab with the squared corners, it had got the rounded cutaway over the top. So this was particular to locomotives. It wasn't just Austerities, but it was particular to locomotives operating on that system. Otherwise, outwardly it's a standard Austerity. So the corners of the bunker have been cut in as well as the cab. Moving a bit later in time, again, we come now to what's got a diesel ejector, and this was to improve the drafting. So it would promote the full burning of the fire and all the gases involved in the combustion. It would be more efficient and create a more even draft on the fire. So these sound a bit different as well. We'll be doing a different sound recording to replicate the diesel. This one again has got many standard Austerity features, the main difference being the diesel and the cutout in the front of the water tank over the boiler. So moving to the right to the end of the industrial Austerity period, we've got this, which is the later Porter modified, or the gas producing combustion system, GPCS. So this has got, like the locomotive here, we've got the choke on front of the smoke box, we've got the Zontar chimney or diffuser. We've also got the holes in the side of the firebox to allow the tertiary air in there. And this one, being a later model, will have the double gusseted buffer beams and other late features of the loco. So that about wraps up our visit here today at the Buckinghamshire Rail Centre. Thanks for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the launch of the Austerity. If you want to read more and find out about the whole range, please have a look on the website, links below. You can order them from a range of our retailers, or indeed from ourselves. I think that's pretty much it for now. I'm going to go and have a look, see what else we can find. See you next time.